things we have taken for granted to a certain extent, that Europe is a peaceful continent, or has become a peaceful continent over a period of 75 years. And I know about the Balkan War, but that could have been considered an outlier. But now we are faced with a situation that maybe we have to look back at our history and relearn the lessons of history again, and how to deal with the fact that peace is not forgiven. So that is a big challenge ahead, and I think we have to relearn things because we are not properly prepared for that mentally. And then I include myself. I mean, I'm not as such prepared for looking at a Europe where old rivalries re-emerge, where borders are questioned, even whole statehoods are questioned, and where force and military force is used as an instrument of change. So that is a big challenge. But then that is an urgent challenge. But then overall, this is a big climate challenge. I mean, this is a real big issue for all of us, for the world. And it's one of the things when you look at your things to do, I cluster them usually in important and urgent, then that's the thing I need to do. Then important but not urgent. And so far, the climate crisis has been in the category of important but not urgent. But it's moving in the important but urgent issue very much. It is urgent and it is important, but it's put often on the back burner. And then I see in the context also, still for me in my mind, the question of nationalism, re-emergence of nationalism, and polarization in societies, but also in Europe as an undercurrent issue, which has then also implication on social issues and so on. So it's all intermingled, but for me, as starters, these are challenges we have to deal with, and it's and they have lots of implications on other things. Like, for example, now the war has an issue related to energy and climate, has an implication on potentially hunger and inflation and so on. So it's probably, I would say, the most complex, the most difficult period, certainly in my lifetime.
So if I can come in, I completely agree with Andre, except that I'd like to look at this sort of from a distance a little bit to start with, and basically say I think the writing has been on the wall for some time, and there are some characteristics in the kinds of challenges that Europe is facing where it fails short of being able to address the issue. And I mean, even in the middle of this crisis, not everything that Europe is doing, although people have been very surprised by the amount of solidarity, is sufficient. And so we have become capable of kidding ourselves that we're actually responding to something when we're not. And so we've gotten used to, and I kind of agree with what Andre is saying, we've gotten used to peace without understanding the implications. We've gotten used to having things easy, and something can be deferred. And certainly there is a set of crises that have been periodic in coming over time that actually have at their root also that there are people who are not, whose views, whose perspective, whose attitudes are not being taken into account sufficiently. And so I think this is one of the most serious problems Europe needs to deal with, is the voiceless, or the people who have strong opinions, maybe that we don't agree with, but who feel that their voices are not being heard. And so this is going to lead to even more problems coming forward. And I would say this is all interconnected. So to separate climate from war, from energy prices, from the migrant problems, from the callousness about some kinds of refugees and migrants, and the overwhelming solidarity for others, all of this is interconnected, right? So it's ironic, for example, that prior to this crisis, Poland was seen as being anti-refugee, and today it's housing more refugees than anybody else with no problem. Why? Because it's contextual. And so I think there are some contextual cultural problems in the Europe that we're all hoping and aspiring for, that we as a foundation need to look at very squarely and very openly. So it's not that I have the answers, but I do think we need to start asking some different questions.